You know, this is one of the most complex all-in-one blueprint factories I have ever made in Satisfactory. This is Tier 7 and 8 personal storage unit with built-in dimensional cloud uploaders. So once you connect all the raw resources on the super convenient patch panel, you get yourself every single aluminum grade item in the cloud storage. Among produced items are radio control unit, turbo motor, supercomputer, cooling system, heatsink, battery, electromagnetic control rod, empty fluid tank, aluminum casing and aluminum sheet. This factory is made with two blueprint modules, where the second module is an expansion with convenient set of connections on the exterior sides. Aside raw resources, this factory rely on my previously released electro and steel fluctuators for the import of computers and heavy modular frames. Yep, this is a part of a bigger personal cloud storage system, and in the future videos I would also add weapon, bio-waste and tier 9 units to my collection of fluctuators. So like, share and subscribe for more. Today in this video, I would cover the thought processes behind this factory. There are a lot of small hidden features to explain. Also, we have an awesome exterior, and the schematics with alternative recipes, well, it's a kingdom of its own. In the course of the last year, I have made and shared almost 300 factory blueprints in Satisfactory. And even with me having prior knowledge like this project took almost a week to design and test. And I'm giving it out for right here, right now. Just sign up to my Patreon and download it for free. Patreon.com/Yakez. Alrighty, so what is so special about this one-clicky-clacky setup? Well, out of the box, if you are willing to make everything tier 7 and 8 from the scratch in one factory, it will take quite some space. Way more than even using two 6x6 blueprints. Previously, I have done something similar in 4x4 format, and it literally took me 8 blueprints to complete the similar setup. And now I want to step down and to use only two 6x6 blueprints. Obviously this is like the huge step down in volume, even though it's 6x6 it's still way less volume. And the question here is how one can make it into convenient module, and what are the steps of production chain that can be outsourced elsewhere, well, reasonably elsewhere. Before we even start on module separation, there are 3 necessary items that definitely should be handled outside of the factory. Those are rubber, plastic and aluminum ingots. And yes, I know that aluminum is way more sexier to say, but I think I got something called America! And I'm dropping letters for no reason. Alright, so for those 3 items, and also concrete, I'm always making separate refineries, since well, they are usually in different spots of the map, and it is way easier to handle solids rather than liquids during logistics. Also, until this tier 7 and 8 fluctuator, I had no uploader for plastic and rubber, so that is also a nice excuse to include 2 extra uploaders for overflow of rubber and plastic into this build. Second step is to inspect what are the reasonable imports and items that can be reduced from the production bloat. I have already made 3 fluctuator setups for all the items from tier 0 to tier 6. One of the reasons why I never really bothered with awesome sync for those 3 factories, well, it was the potential to use them in upper production steps like tier 7 and 8. And 2 final items from 2 fluctuators do stand out. First, they are final and do not feed anything else. Second, you can easily bump up their production twice with summer slurps if necessary. So even if you feed your aluminum fluctuator, you still can get all the full production ratio from those items just if you add extra summer slurps. And those 2 items are computers and heavy modular frames. This way we have the first limiting factor for the factory in the place of 6.6 computers per minute and 2.8 heavy modular frames per minute. So, this is how far we can reasonably decrease the production bloat for our exports into our tier 7 and 8 fluctuator. Next step was the debloat through the alternative recipes. First small note is rods, screws and steel beams. As a result of new alternative recipes in Satisfactory 1.0, now we can use aluminum for all those items, which is quite handy in this factory. We will handle aluminum in any case, so this is an easy pick, although quite insignificant one. Next big one recipe is the choice of alternative recipe for supercomputers. And I went for super state computers for several reasons. First, standard recipe was using too much Caterium in space with all those high-speed connectors and AI limiters. Second, production ratio and computer use per supercomputer on the standard recipe is just too high in comparison. Third, we can finally utilize our battery production. We are still producing batteries in this factory in any case, so let's not waste them for, well, nothing. So yeah, this way we can utilize one of the other items to produce other item, which is convenient. It was quite tempting to use OC supercomputer, but my main issue was the use of cooling system, and it was apparent pretty early on that if I will use that recipe, it will just blow the second module for no reason. Next item on the list were previously mentioned batteries. Standard recipe for batteries is something unusable. When I'm looking at recipe like this, I'm like, за что же, блядь? Like, look at this. We have byproduct of water, then we are using sulfuric acid and alumina solution. Yeah, so we need to have coal generator to destroy water, then we need to produce 2 extra liquids and also to handle them. No way. So, classic battery is the only reasonable option here. It is way simpler solution. Also, classic battery do require plastic, and this is the point where I decided to cut one more corner with quite convenient recipe for AI limiters. Plastic AI limiter is the first and the only alternative recipe for AI limiters, and the crystal oscillators is another corner cut with the insulated crystal oscillator. Basically, we are doubling down on rubber and plastic imports here. If we compare the insulated crystal oscillator to the standard recipe, we are eliminating the production of reinforced iron plates and cables. Another 2 corner cutting recipes here would be the iron pipes and fused wire. Iron pipes allow to remove coal from the factory, and fused wire is just mainly here to reduce the amount of machinery in the overall build. So at this point, you can see that the main principle of this factory layout is to eliminate extra production steps and to use the least amount of machines. While it is not the most efficient way, it definitely saves quite some space and allows for such a compact factory. And before I bore you to death with all those extra recipes, let's just explore the fun parts of this factory build. So let's go for the fun parts. You are looking at so-called patch panel, and it is called patch panel because I don't know why, but this reminds me of fancy schmancy rack equipment. And the fun fact that I was actually connecting 12-port patch panel and bunch of LAN RG45 sockets this week, and for me it was like the first time ever since 2007, when I was like a freshman in the university. And yeah, I feel dated a bit right now, so Satisfactory, let's talk about something that totally not influenced by real life. On this patch panel, we have a bunch of power switchers for simple logic, then there is the overflow output for awesome sync, connections for iron, copper, Caterium, sulfur, quartz, nitrogen, and import sockets for plastic, rubber, aluminum ingots, and computers with heavy module frames. And 4 of those sockets have something special about them. First, plastic and rubber setup have dimensional cloud uploaders with the smart splitters right after the factory input. Both splitters are set to overflow, so once factory is saturated, they would upload rubber and plastic into the cloud. Next feature is computer and heavy modular frame input. While I do design this factory as a part of a bigger fluctuator system, well, I want to have the ability to use it manually if I am too lazy to connect 2 extra belts. So, aside 2 input sockets where we have, well, the inputs of computers and heavy module frames, there are 2 extra storage containers that act as manual input for those 2 items. One container is an input, and the second container is just the protection bin in the case if you happen just to input something that is not computer or heavy module frame. You know, we do not really want to have any nasty clogs in our factory plumbing, otherwise we would be in Swedish corn business by this point. Another feature of manual computer and heavy module frame input is to have buffers in place inside of the factory. Quite simple, yet effective. Although there are some like fringe cases where the system like this can clog one of the items, but I couldn't really bother making extra bypass for the sake of having that bypass. You know, just do not insert too much items, or better yet, just beat your laziness and connect permanent inputs after several first manual runs. Another interesting thing with this personal storage factory is the layout of storage containers, uploaders, and awesome sync outlet. One of the most common questions for my fluctuators is the ability to sync items into an awesome sync, and the only feasible way to do this is to add smart splitter with overflow setting before storage container. And obviously storage containers are situated before dimensional cloud uploaders. In this manner, storage containers still act as both buffers for items and manual access points if for some reason you are literally need to have thousands of items in the short time frame. With smart splitters, I just made one loop with mergers for all 9 items stored down below, and finally this loop terminates at Awesome Sync outlet. Although factory produced total of 11 items, 2 of those items are just the weird ones. Electromagnetic rods and heat sinks are never used in any independent construction, so naturally, I just do not do manual access points for those items down below. So they will not sync into Awesome Sync, although they still have buffers and cloud uploaders. Also, there are only 9 spots for the storage containers on the face of 6x6 blueprint, so, well, sacrifices were made. Next interesting feature is the turbo motor and fuse modular frame power switches. They are just separate power chains for those items. They are to boost production ratios for aluminum casings, cooling devices and radio control units if necessary. And finally, we have arrived to most important question: how one can connect 2 modular blueprints together? I have tried numerous designs over the last year, and while some of those designs are rather straightforward, like in the case of my old computer factory, well, it just doesn't look nice. So my requirement is the ease of connection, preferably connections that are done from the ground down below and the connections that are at exterior. Also, those connections should be something that looks flush with the exterior or looks as a part of overall factory design. Since there are a lot of back and forth between 2 blueprints, I ended up with a total of 11 connections and first. Then, I thought for a second and just decided to swap the ground floor storage of electromagnetic control rods to empty fluid tanks, which are produced stairs, and this bumped the amount of connections to a total of 12 items. So there are 2 sets of 6 conveyor lifts on the both sides. I'm using aligned conveyor lift holes for both blueprints to make everything flush, and technically there is 1 set of connections for pipes with the nitrogen gas, but well, this is like an obvious necessity. For the power connections, I have 3 sets of outlets above my switch setup, and they just connect to similar outlets above them in the Blueprint B. And speaking of the Blueprint B, let's do the talk about the rest of important alternative recipes and overall factory ratios. With this factory, straight out of the gate, I knew that I need to overclock bunch of machines to fit everything into such a small package. And this dictated some of the recipes like iron alloy and copper alloy ingots. This factory, somewhat limited by 2 foundries at maximum 250 overclock for those 2 recipes. Also, this dictated the import of iron ingots to the Blueprint B for production of motors for turbo motor production. With that extra copper alloy production, I was able to boost aluminum casing production with the Alcat casing alternative recipe. In the Blueprint B, I'm using quick-wire stator to avoid copper, and for the same reason I opted for heat exchanger alternative recipe over the standard. I'm using previously mentioned aluminum recipes to avoid coal, and finally I also opted for cooling device alt recipe because, well, I can just avoid use of water and I can cut on the nitrogen use by using this alternative recipe. Obvious elephant in the room is the way to split A and B blueprints, and this is mostly tied to the big machinery like manufacturers and blenders. Blueprint A have total of 4 manufacturers, and Blueprint B have 2 blenders and 1 manufacturer. Also, splitting everything is related to nitrogen gas. It was like sort of a turning point and do dictate the majority of Blueprint B layout. Like, the only unrelated thing is the empty fluid tanks, although they're still kinda related, so there's that. And the fun fact about this factory is the ability to start with Blueprint A and with the progression of tier 7 to 8, only later just to add the Blueprint B, which is like higher level of technologies, so there's that. The exterior of the factory have quite similar gradient beam design to previous fluctuators, and one of the most common questions is how those gradients are made. And well, in Satisfactory 1.4, well, the process is still as painful as ever. There are color presets that are bound to save files, and it's kind of sort of a bad idea to do it on the shared blueprint since your colors would be different to mine. And I'm sort of stuck with the single custom color tab. And this means that every time when I'm doing different color, I need to import it as a hex code from somewhere else, like cssgradient.io. Although I can save them, but it's actually faster to go back and forth between 2 windows than to use this idiotic drop-down menu where is no search and stuff, yeah. Satisfactory 1.0, yeah. Another nice change from my previous fluctuators is the signs. They are bigger, they are angled, and there are also production ratios underneath. Also, I went for no eliminations of the signs itself, since it's just hard on ice, and I'm just running secondary lights overhead as a light source for my signs. This is like the feature that I want to bring to every single fluctuator that I done before, but well, it sort of takes time to redo that stuff, and yeah, they are still in early access. This is why they are early access, because I want to make them perfect for my public release and stuff. And speaking of my Patreon stuff, well, if you are new here, there are like a dozen of early access factory blueprints for my paid Patreon members. There are a couple of Patreon exclusive exterior blueprints, and for free there are like 300 factory blueprints. Yes, there are a lot of free stuff there. I'm really grateful for all my paid Patreon members. Without you, yes, you, this channel would be probably on infinite hiatus. As always, thank you for watching. Have a nice one, and Yakez is out to find a proper aluminum Christmas toys. Like, why everything is so plastic these days? I want aluminum balls on my Christmas tree so I can grab cold metal ball and lean it against my friend's neck. And I will have no friends then.